The small, battered hatchback groaned as it sped down a quiet suburban road, its driver gripping the wheel with determination. Elijah Carter wasn't just racing against time. He was chasing hope. At 18, with dreams weighed down by responsibilities, Elijah thought today might finally be his chance to turn things around. A job interview at the local grocery store was his ticket to easing his family's struggles. But then he saw her. A silver SUV sat stranded on the shoulder, its hazard lights flashing. Beside it, a woman cradled her swollen belly, pacing anxiously. Elijah's pulse quickened. Should he stop? Could he really afford to be late for something so important? The decision wasn't easy. What would you do if you were in his place? Would you risk your future to help a stranger? Elijah had no idea that a single choice would set off a chain of events, weaving lives together in ways he couldn't imagine. Who was this woman? And what ripple effects would Elijah's decision unleash? As the clock ticked and tension mounted, Elijah had to make a choice. One that would change everything. Would it be worth it? Only time would tell. Before we begin, let us know where you are watching this story from. Is it cold there? Is it snowing heavily? Make yourself a warm cup of cappuccino and gather your loved ones to enjoy today's story together. Don't forget to subscribe but before we go looking for the answer, tell us where you're watching from and what the weather is like there. It would be wonderful to watch together with your loved ones and your small family. If possible, prepare a warm hot toddy before we dive into today's story. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to give us the motivation to bring you even more interesting stories. Thank you so much. Now, let's get started. More great stories. Elijah Carter tightened his grip on the worn steering wheel of his 20-year-old hatchback, the car rattling with every bump along the quiet suburban road. At just 18 years old, Elijah carried more weight on his shoulders than most kids his age. Today was no exception. This wasn't just any day. It was the day of his long-awaited interview at Stanton's Market, the local grocery store. The job meant more than a paycheck. It was his chance to help ease his mom's financial burden and keep his younger brother, Liam, focused on school rather than worrying about bills. The hatchback sputtered as he accelerated, and Elijah cast a nervous glance at the fuel gauge. The needle hovered dangerously close to empty. "Come on, baby. Just a little further," he muttered, patting the dashboard as if coaxing the car would make it cooperate. As he approached a bend in the road, something caught his eye. A silver SUV parked on the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking. Beside it stood a woman, pacing anxiously under the midday sun. Her rounded belly was unmistakable, and the sweat dripping down her face told Elijah she was more than just stranded. She was in distress. Elijah slowed down instinctively, his eyes darting to the clock on the dashboard. 11:10 a.m. The interview was at 11:30, and Stanton's Market was still several miles away. His chest tightened as he weighed his options. He needed this job. But then he looked back at the woman, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, and he could almost hear his mother's voice. "Always do what's right, even if it's not easy." Letting out a resigned sigh, Elijah pulled over and parked behind the SUV. "Guess we're doing this," he muttered to himself before stepping out of the car. The woman turned sharply as Elijah approached, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She eyed him warily, her gaze flickering to his beat-up car and then back to him. Hey," Elijah called out, raising his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm not here to bother you. Looks like you've got a flat tire. Need some help?" The woman hesitated, her free hand resting on her lower back. Yeah, it's a flat. I hit something back there, and I've been trying to call for help, but there's no signal out here," she explained, her voice tinged with frustration. Elijah nodded. "No problem. I can change it for you. Do you have a spare?" "In the back," she said, her relief evident as she gestured toward the trunk. Elijah moved to the SUV, opening the trunk to retrieve the spare tire and jack. The sun beat down relentlessly as he crouched beside the car, loosening the lug nuts on the damaged tire. "How far along are you?" he asked, trying to make conversation to ease the tension. 36 weeks, she replied, a hand instinctively resting on her belly. "It's my first." "Wow, exciting but stressful, huh?" Elijah chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah, something like that," she said, offering a faint smile. Elijah Carter knelt beside the SUV, his hands working swiftly to loosen the lug nuts on the flat tire. The sun blazed above him, beads of sweat running down his temple as he focused on the task. The spare tire lay ready beside him, and despite the pressure of time, Elijah felt a small sense of accomplishment knowing he was helping someone in need. "I've almost got it," he called over his shoulder, glancing briefly at the woman leaning against the car. Her hand rested on her belly, her expression a mix of discomfort and unease. "Thank you," she said faintly. "I don't know what I'd have done if you hadn't stopped." "It's no problem," Elijah replied, though a pang of anxiety tugged at him. He hadn't checked the time since pulling over, but the seconds felt like they were slipping away faster than he wanted. He tightened his grip on the wrench, his determination overriding the worry gnawing at the back of his mind. Just as he began lifting the spare tire into place, a sharp gasp from behind made him freeze. He turned quickly, his heart dropping when he saw the woman clutching her stomach, her face pale and twisted in pain. "Ma'am, what's wrong?" Elijah asked, stepping toward her. It's my stomach," she stammered, her voice tight with strain. She winced, doubling over as another wave of pain gripped her. "I think it's contractions. They're coming fast." Elijah's pulse quickened, panic threatening to take hold. "Contractions? Are you in labor?" The woman shook her head, trying to catch her breath. I don't know, but it feels like it." Elijah looked back at the half-changed tire and then at the woman, who was now leaning heavily against the car for support. His mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. Okay, he muttered, more to himself than her. "We need to get you to a hospital. Now." She nodded weakly, her hand gripping the car door for balance. Elijah moved to her side, offering his arm to steady her. "Come on, my car's right there," he said, guiding her toward his old hatchback. The woman winced with each step, her breaths shallow and uneven. Elijah opened the passenger door and helped her ease into the seat, adjusting it to make her as comfortable as possible. "You're going to be okay," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "What's your name?" "Leona," she managed to say through clenched teeth. "All right, Leona. I'm Elijah. You hang in there, all right? We'll get you to the hospital." Elijah jogged around to the driver's side, gripping the wheel tightly as he started the engine. The old car sputtered before roaring to life, and Elijah pulled back onto the road, the tires kicking up gravel as he accelerated. "Where's the nearest hospital?" he asked, glancing at her briefly. "Greenfield Memorial," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's about 10 minutes, if you take Main Street." Elijah nodded, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar streets for signs pointing to the hospital. The car rattled as he sped over potholes, the engine groaning in protest, but Elijah didn't let up. "You're doing great, Leona. Just keep breathing," he said, glancing at her between turns. Leona nodded faintly, gripping the armrest as another contraction gripped her. "It hurts," she murmured, her voice cracking. "I know," Elijah said, his voice steady but urgent. "We're almost there. Just hold on." The sight of the hospital's emergency room entrance brought a wave of relief crashing over Elijah. He pulled up to the curb, the car screeching to a halt as he threw it into park. Jumping out, he waved his arms at a nearby nurse. "She's in labor," he shouted. "She needs help." The nurse hurried inside, and moments later, a team of hospital staff emerged with a wheelchair. Elijah opened the passenger door, helping Leona swing her legs out as gently as he could. "You're going to be okay," he said, gripping her arm for support. Leona winced, her breathing shallow as the nurses eased her into the wheelchair. Her gaze met Elijah's briefly, her eyes filled with gratitude despite the pain. "Thank you," she whispered. Elijah nodded, stepping back as the hospital staff wheeled her inside. He stood there for a moment, staring after her as the automatic doors closed, sealing Leona within the chaotic yet comforting world of the emergency ward. His chest heaved as he tried to calm his racing heart. The reality of the situation hit him like a wave. He had just delivered a woman in labor to the hospital, but as the adrenaline faded, another thought took hold. Elijah glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 11:37 a.m. The interview had started 7 minutes ago. Damn, he muttered under his breath, running a hand down his face. Climbing back into the driver's seat, he stared out at the road ahead. He had no time to linger. As he pulled away from the hospital, his thoughts swirled in a tangled mess of emotions: relief, worry, and doubt. Did he do the right thing? Should he have just driven past her to make the interview on time? But as he gripped the wheel tighter, Elijah knew the answer. Helping Leona was something he couldn't have lived without doing. Little did he know, this selfless act would ripple far beyond this moment, changing not just her life but his own in ways he could never have imagined. Elijah Carter pulled into the grocery store parking lot, his old hatchback screeching as it came to an abrupt stop. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 a.m. His heart sank. The interview had started over 15 minutes ago, and he could already feel the weight of the odds stacked against him. "Maybe they'll still let me explain," he muttered, grabbing his worn leather folder from the passenger seat. His hands trembled as he stepped out of the car, his shirt damp with sweat from the frantic drive. He tried smoothing the wrinkles from his button-down shirt, but the effort only made the stains from his earlier efforts with the tire and Leona's labor more obvious. Taking a deep breath, Elijah pushed through the store's glass doors. The bright fluorescent lights and hum of activity hit him like a wall. Shoppers moved casually through the aisles, unaware of the storm brewing inside Elijah's chest. He approached the manager's office at the back of the store, the door slightly ajar. Inside, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a clipboard stood flipping through paperwork. Elijah knocked lightly, clearing his throat to get the man's attention. The manager looked up, his expression sharp as he scanned Elijah's disheveled appearance. "Can I help you?" "Yes, sir," Elijah began, trying to steady his voice. "I'm Elijah Carter. I was scheduled for an interview at 11:30. The manager raised an eyebrow, glancing at the clock on the wall. "It's 11:47. "I know, and I'm really sorry," Elijah said quickly. "There was an emergency, a woman stranded on the road. She was pregnant and went into labor. I had to drive her to the hospital. I didn't have a choice." The manager crossed his arms, his expression unchanging. "So, you're telling me you're late because you decided to play Good Samaritan?" Elijah stiffened. "It wasn't about that, sir. She needed help. There was no one else around. I couldn't just leave her there." The manager let out a humorless chuckle, shaking his head. "Well, that's a nice story, but punctuality is part of the job. If you can't show up on time for an interview, how can I trust you to show up on time for your shifts?" "Please, just give me 5 minutes to explain," Elijah pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "I really need this job. I'm a hard worker, and I won't let you down." The manager sighed, glancing back at the paperwork on his desk. "Look, kid, I appreciate what you did, but the position's already been filled. We don't have time for excuses here. Good luck next time." For a moment, Elijah stood frozen, his heart sinking as the words settled over him like a heavy weight. Finally, he nodded, his voice barely audible. "Thank you for your time, sir." He turned and walked out, his head bowed and his folder clutched tightly in his hand. The sting of rejection burned in his chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. By the time he reached his car, frustration and doubt had begun to take hold. Slamming the door shut, Elijah gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. "Did I mess up?" he whispered to himself. "Should I have just kept driving?" The image of Leona flashed through his mind. Her pale face, the fear in her eyes, the way she clutched her stomach in pain. Leaving her stranded wasn't something he could live with. And yet, the consequences of his decision now loomed large. This job had been his chance to help his mom, to make life a little easier for her and his younger sister. Now, that opportunity was gone. Elijah leaned back in his seat, staring at the cracked ceiling of his car. As he started the engine, the familiar sputter reminded him of everything that felt fragile in his life. With nowhere else to go, he drove aimlessly through the streets, the rejection replaying in his mind like a broken record. He found himself parked near a local park, the sound of children's laughter carrying through the air. Elijah stepped out of the car, walking toward a bench and collapsing onto it with a deep sigh. In front of him, A father chased his giggling daughter across the grass. The scene stirred something in Elijah, a longing for the simpler days when his family felt whole. But those days were long gone, replaced by the constant scramble to make ends meet. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Elijah felt a flicker of resolve take hold. He didn't regret helping Leona. No matter what it had cost him, he knew he'd made the right choice. For now, though, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on his shoulders. What he didn't know was that this moment of despair was just the beginning of a journey that would reshape his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Leona Hayes sat in her hospital room, the soft light of early evening casting a warm glow across the walls. In her arms lay Owen, her newborn son, swaddled tightly and sleeping peacefully. Despite the exhaustion of labor and delivery, Leona's mind was far from quiet. She couldn't stop replaying the events that had led her here. The panic of being stranded on the roadside, the pain of sudden contractions, and the calm, steady presence of the young man who had gone out of his way to help her. Elijah, she murmured, the name lingering on her lips. She didn't know much about him, just his first name, his old hatchback that rattled like it was barely holding together, and the quiet determination in his voice as he reassured her. But one thing was certain. She wouldn't be holding Owen in her arms if it weren't for him. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Her husband, Thomas Hayes, stepped into the room, his crisp business suit slightly rumpled and his expression filled with relief. "How are you feeling?" he asked, crossing the room to sit beside her. "Tired," Leona admitted with a small smile. "But we're both okay." Thomas reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face before leaning down to kiss her forehead. "That's all that matters." His eyes shifted to the bundle in her arms, his expression softening. "And how's this little guy?" "Perfect," Leona said, her voice thick with emotion. "But, Thomas, I need to tell you something." He tilted his head, his brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" Leona took a deep breath, recounting the events of the day, the flat tire, the stranded roadside, and the young man who had stopped to help. She described how Elijah had not only changed her tire but had also driven her to the hospital when her contractions started, abandoning whatever plans he had to ensure she and the baby were safe. "He didn't ask for anything," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "He just helped. And then he left before I could even thank him properly." Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Sounds like this kid went above and beyond." "He did," Leona agreed, her grip tightening on Owen. "I wouldn't have made it here without him, Thomas. We have to find him. We have to thank him." Thomas nodded slowly. "All right. Tell me everything you remember. His name, what his car looked like, where you were when he found you." Leona's eyes lit up with hope. "You'll help me?" "Of course," Thomas said, smiling. "Anyone willing to drop everything to help a stranger deserves our gratitude. Let's figure this out." The next morning, the Hayes family's sleek black SUV rolled down the winding suburban streets where Leona had been stranded. Thomas drove, his jaw set with determination, while Leona sat in the passenger seat, scanning the roadside for familiar landmarks. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to a bend in the road. "This is where it happened." Thomas pulled over, and the couple stepped out, taking in their surroundings. The stretch of road was quiet, lined with trees and the occasional mailbox. They approached a small gas station nearby, hoping for a lead. The attendant, a young man with a backwards baseball cap, looked up from his phone as they entered. "Can I help you folks?" "We're looking for someone," Thomas began, pulling out a sketch Leona had drawn of Elijah's car. "A young man driving something like this. His name's Elijah. He helped my wife a few days ago, and we want to find him to thank him." The attendant squinted at the sketch, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, I think I've seen that car. Old thing. Looks like it's held together with duct tape, right?" "That's the one," Leona said eagerly. "He comes through here every now and then," the attendant said, nodding. "Lives a few blocks east of here, I think. Not sure of the exact house, but you might find it if you look around." "Thank you," Thomas said, slipping the young man a tip before heading back to the car. The neighborhood the attendant directed them to was modest, with small, weathered homes, and narrow streets. Thomas drove slowly, scanning each driveway. After nearly 20 minutes of searching, Leona's eyes lit up. "There!" she exclaimed, pointing to a driveway where a beat-up hatchback sat parked, its paint peeling and a dent visible on the passenger door. Thomas pulled over, and they stepped out, their hearts pounding with anticipation. As they approached the house, the front door opened, and Elijah stepped out, his expression cautious as he noticed the unfamiliar faces. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice wary. Leona smiled, stepping forward. "Elijah, it's me, Leona Hayes. You helped me a few days ago when my car broke down." Recognition flickered across Elijah's face. "Oh yeah, I remember. This is my husband, Thomas," Leona said, motioning to the man beside her. "We've been looking for you. I can't thank you enough for what you did. You saved me and my baby." Elijah shifted awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just did what anyone would have done." "Not everyone would have stopped," Thomas said, stepping forward to shake Elijah's hand. "You went out of your way for a stranger, and we want to show our gratitude." Elijah hesitated, glancing between the couple. "You really didn't have to." "We insist," Leona said firmly. "You gave us a gift we can never repay. At least let us try." The Hayes family had no idea how this encounter would further intertwine their lives with Elijah's. For now, it was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The creak of the screen door echoed as Elijah Carter stepped outside to meet the visitors parked in his driveway. His modest home, with its peeling paint and sagging porch, felt like an unlikely setting for the polished couple now standing before him. Leona Hayes smiled warmly, her husband Thomas at her side, both out of place in the quiet, worn-down neighborhood. "Thank you for letting us stop by," Thomas said, extending a hand to Elijah. "We didn't mean to show up unannounced, but this was too important to wait." Elijah shook his hand, his confusion evident. "I'm not sure what else I can do for you," he said, his tone cautious but polite. "I'm just glad I could help that day." Leona stepped forward, her smile soft. "We're not here to ask for anything, Elijah. We're here to thank you properly for saving my life and Owen's. But this is more than just gratitude. We've been thinking about how we can give back to you." Elijah blinked, surprised. "I didn't do it expecting anything in return. Really, it was just the right thing to do." At that moment, Elijah's mother, Camille, appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Her expression shifted from curiosity to polite warmth as she stepped onto the porch. "Hello there," she greeted them, her voice calm but wary. "Mrs. Carter," Thomas began. "I'm Thomas Hayes, and this is my wife, Leona. Your son helped us during an emergency, and we've come to express our thanks." Camille glanced at Elijah, who avoided her gaze. "Oh, did he?" she said with a small smile. "That sounds like Elijah, always doing what he can for others." "It's more than that," Leona said, her voice thick with emotion. "He stayed calm under pressure, drove me to the hospital, and made sure my baby and I were safe. I wouldn't be here without him." Camille's brows lifted as she looked at her son. "Well, I'm not surprised, but it's nice to hear. Come inside, please." Inside the Carter home, the living room bore the marks of a family doing their best with limited means. A patched-up sofa sat against one wall. Mismatched chairs surrounded a small coffee table, and a single family portrait hung slightly askew above the mantel. Camille gestured for the Hayes couple to sit while Elijah stood awkwardly to the side. "This is a lovely home," Leona said sincerely. "Thank you," Camille replied, sitting in the chair closest to Elijah. "So, what brings you all the way here?" Thomas cleared his throat, leaning forward with a thoughtful expression. "We wanted to do more than say thank you. We want to help Elijah with his future. He mentioned he has dreams of becoming a doctor." Elijah stiffened, his eyes widening. I used to," he admitted quietly, his gaze dropping to the worn carpet. "What stopped you?" Thomas asked gently. Elijah hesitated before Camille spoke up. "It's not that he isn't capable," she said firmly. "It's just not easy to make those kinds of dreams happen when you've got bills to pay and responsibilities to shoulder." Thomas nodded, his tone resolute. "We'd like to take that burden off your shoulders." Elijah, we want to offer you a full scholarship to pursue your dream. Tuition, books, housing, everything covered. All you need to do is focus on your studies. The room fell silent, the offer hanging in the air like a weighty gift too large to grasp all at once. Camille looked at her son, her eyes glistening. Is this real? Yes, ma'am, Thomas assured her. And there's more. We've also talked about extending the same offer to Liam. Wait, Elijah interrupted, his voice unsteady. You're saying you'll pay for both of us? Liam too? Thomas nodded. Absolutely. We see potential in both of you, and we believe in investing in that potential. Education is a gift that changes lives, not just yours, but the people you'll go on to help. Liam, who had been eavesdropping from the hallway, stepped into the room, his face a mix of shock and excitement. You mean I could actually go to college? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That's exactly what we're saying, Leona replied, smiling. Liam looked at Elijah, as if waiting for his brother to say something, but Elijah remained silent, his thoughts a whirlwind of doubt and disbelief. That evening, the family gathered around the kitchen table, their emotions running high. Camille sat with her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on Elijah. This is a blessing, she said softly. You've worked so hard, and now someone's offering to help you. How often does that happen? Elijah shook his head. It feels too good to be true, Ma. What if it's more than I can handle? What if I mess it up? Camille reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. You won't. You've carried this family through so much, Elijah. It's time to let someone carry you for a while. Liam chimed in, his voice eager. Elijah, we've always looked up to you. If you can do this, so can I. Let's take this chance together. Elijah looked at his brother, his mother, and the hope in their eyes. Finally, he exhaled and nodded. Okay, he said quietly. Let's do it. The next morning, when the Hayes family returned to finalize the details, Thomas shook Elijah's hand firmly. You won't regret this decision, Elijah. The hard work will be yours, but we're here to help you succeed. Leona smiled, adding, Your kindness changed our lives. It's only right we do the same for you. As the two families parted that day, a new chapter began, not just for Elijah, but for all of them. The hum of campus life surrounded Elijah Carter as he stepped onto the university grounds for the first time. The sprawling brick buildings, manicured lawns, and buzzing chatter of students were a world away from his small, quiet neighborhood. Slinging his backpack over his shoulder, Elijah couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was the start of something new, something he never thought possible. His first semester was packed with general education classes, but it was his biology and chemistry courses that ignited a fire within him. Elijah spent late nights poring over textbooks, solving equations, and jotting notes in his meticulously organized notebook. The lectures were fast-paced, and the material was dense, but Elijah refused to fall behind. One evening after class, his biology professor, Dr. Harper, approached him as he packed his bag. Elijah, she began, holding one of his graded assignments. Your work has been exceptional. Have you considered joining the student research team? I think you'd be a great fit. Elijah blinked, surprised. Me? Really? Dr. Harper nodded. Absolutely. You've got the drive and the potential. Think about it. Opportunities like this can open doors. Elijah's chest swelled with pride. For the first time in years, he began to believe in the possibility of becoming a doctor, a dream he had long buried beneath layers of responsibility and self-doubt. Back at home, Elijah's younger brother, Liam, was finding inspiration in his brother's journey. Watching Elijah juggle college and part-time work with unwavering determination sparked something in Liam. He began diving deeper into his own studies, setting ambitious goals for himself. Liam's interest in history and government grew into a passion for law and social justice. He started reading about legal cases and how they impacted families like theirs, families who often lacked the resources to fight for their rights. One night, while Elijah was visiting home, Liam sat him down at the kitchen table. I think I know what I want to do, Liam said, his voice steady but full of excitement. Oh yeah? Elijah asked, raising an eyebrow. I want to be a lawyer, Liam said. I want to help people who don't have a voice, people like us. Elijah leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. That's a big goal, little bro. But if anyone can do it, it's you. Liam grinned, his confidence bolstered by his brother's belief in him. I've got a good example to follow. Meanwhile, Camille Carter's life was undergoing its own transformation. Thanks to Thomas Hayes' offer, she had started working as an administrator at his company. The transition from years of waitressing and cleaning jobs to an office environment was daunting at first. Her first week was filled with training sessions on spreadsheets, scheduling software, and office protocols. Camille doubted herself, worried she wouldn't catch on quickly enough. But her co-workers were patient, and her supervisor, Sharon, often stopped by her desk with words of encouragement. "Camille," Sharon said one afternoon, "you've got a knack for this. I can already tell you're going to be a great asset to the team." Those words stuck with Camille. By the end of her first month, she was confidently managing schedules, organizing files, and even suggesting ways to streamline certain processes. The regular hours and steady paycheck were a welcome change, but it was the sense of purpose that truly made the job rewarding. At home, the impact of her new job was undeniable. The family no longer had to stress over unpaid bills or skipped meals. Camille even started putting money aside for the future, a thought that had once seemed impossible. As the months passed, Elijah's hard work began to pay off. He aced his midterms, earning recognition from both his professors and peers. His classmates often turned to him for help during study sessions, and he found himself thriving not only academically but also socially. Dr. Harper's recommendation led to an opportunity to join a research project studying cellular biology, a field Elijah found fascinating. The experience gave him a glimpse into the world of medical research and reaffirmed his dream of becoming a doctor. Liam, too, was making strides. He maintained top grades in his classes and started volunteering at a local community center, where he mentored kids from underprivileged backgrounds. The experience solidified his commitment to pursuing law as a means to fight for justice and equality. Camille, now thriving at her job, often came home with stories of her accomplishments. Her pride in both her sons was palpable, and the newfound stability allowed her to fully support their dreams. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, the atmosphere was lighter than it had been in years. Camille served a meal of roast chicken and vegetables, smiling as Liam recounted his latest volunteer experience. "You should have seen their faces when I helped them draft that petition," Liam said, his excitement contagious. "They're starting to believe they can actually make a difference." Elijah raised his glass of water. "That's because they've got a great role model." Liam rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his grin. Camille looked at her sons, her heart swelling with pride. "You two are going to change the world," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Elijah chuckled. "One step at a time, Ma." As they laughed and talked, the Carter family embraced their new beginnings. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, it felt filled with possibilities. The second year of college brought a new level of intensity to Elijah Carter's academic life. The rigors of his coursework pushed him to his limits, but with each challenge, he found himself rising to meet it. Whether it was hours spent in the lab or late-night study sessions in the campus library, Elijah was determined to make the most of the opportunity he had been given. His professors took notice of his dedication and curiosity. Dr. Harper, his biology professor and now mentor, often invited him to assist with more advanced research projects. One day after class, she stopped him in the hallway. "Elijah," she began with a smile, "your work on the cellular growth study has been exceptional. Have you ever considered presenting your findings at the Regional Science Symposium?" Elijah blinked, taken aback. "Me? Present at a symposium? Why not?" Dr. Harper replied. "You've got the talent, and it would be a great opportunity to network with professionals in the field." Elijah hesitated, the weight of self-doubt creeping in. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You are," Dr. Harper said firmly. "Believe me, Elijah, you've got what it takes." Her words stuck with him, and after a few days of deliberation, he decided to take the leap. Preparing for the symposium became a turning point for Elijah. Not only did he sharpen his research and presentation skills, but he also gained a newfound confidence in his abilities. Outside the classroom, Elijah found another way to give back. Inspired by his own struggles and the support he had received, he began volunteering at free clinics in underserved neighborhoods. The work was challenging but rewarding. One Saturday afternoon, Elijah sat in the small waiting room of a clinic, explaining a prescription to an elderly man who had just been diagnosed with diabetes. "Thank you, son," the man said, gripping Elijah's hand tightly. "I've been struggling for so long, but no one's ever taken the time to explain things like this before." Elijah smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. "You're not alone in this. We'll get through it together." Moments like these reminded Elijah why he wanted to be a doctor. It wasn't just about the science. It was about making a real difference in people's lives. Back home, Liam was making waves of his own. Inspired by Elijah's success and the belief their mother had instilled in them, Liam worked tirelessly to secure a spot at a top law school. His dream of becoming an advocate for marginalized families drove him to excel in his studies. One evening, Liam received an email that made his heart skip a beat. He opened it cautiously, scanning the words until he found the sentence he had been hoping for. "Congratulations! You have been awarded a full scholarship to attend the College of Law at Eastbrook University." "Mom, Elijah!" Liam yelled, bursting into the living room with his phone in hand. Camille rushed in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "What is it, Liam?" "I got it," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "The scholarship, it's full ride. I'm going to Eastbrook." Camille's face lit up with pride as she pulled Liam into a tight hug. "Oh, baby, I'm so proud of you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Elijah clapped his brother on the back, grinning. "I told you you'd make it. You've got this, Liam." Liam beamed, his confidence bolstered by his family's unwavering support. While her sons were thriving academically, Camille was experiencing her own transformation. Her role at Hayes Enterprises had grown significantly over the past year. Starting as an administrative assistant, Camille quickly proved herself to be reliable, resourceful, and dedicated. One morning, her supervisor, Sharon, called her into the office. "Camille," Sharon began, gesturing for her to sit, "we've been so impressed with your work over the past year. You've gone above and beyond in every task we've given you." Camille smiled nervously. "Thank you, Sharon. That means a lot." "We'd like to offer you a promotion," Sharon continued. "You'd be stepping into a managerial role, overseeing operations for our new community outreach program. It's a big responsibility, but we think you're the perfect fit." Camille's breath caught in her throat. "A managerial role," she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. Sharon nodded. "You've earned it, Camille, and the pay increase and benefits reflect the level of trust we have in you." Tears pricked Camille's eyes as she processed the offer. It was more than she had ever dreamed of, but it was a testament to how far she had come. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Say yes," Sharon said with a warm smile. Camille did, and the promotion marked a new chapter in her life. The financial stability it provided allowed her to focus on supporting her son's dreams without the constant worry of making ends meet. The Carter family's transformation didn't go unnoticed. The once worn-down house now hummed with a sense of hope and renewal. Camille used some of her increased income to make small but meaningful improvements. A fresh coat of paint on the walls, a new dining table where they could gather as a family, and even a small garden in the backyard where she and Liam planted vegetables together. One weekend, as they all sat around the new table for dinner, Camille looked at her sons with pride. "You two are making this family proud," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I've always believed in you, but seeing you both achieve so much, it's more than I could have ever imagined." Elijah smiled, raising his glass of water. "We couldn't have done it without you, Ma. You showed us what it means to keep going, no matter how hard things get." Liam nodded in agreement. "Yeah, you're the reason we're here." As they shared laughter and stories over dinner, the Carter family embraced their new beginnings. The road ahead still held challenges, but they faced it together, united by their shared determination and the belief that their future was brighter than ever. The Carter and Hayes families had formed a bond that transcended mere gratitude. What started as a chance encounter on a suburban roadside grew into a deep and genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Over the years, the two families became more than friends. They became extended family. Thomas and Leona Hayes often invited the Carters over for Sunday dinners, their spacious dining room filled with laughter and warmth. Camille Carter, though initially hesitant about the polished world of the Hayes family, had grown comfortable in their company. She often found herself swapping recipes with Leona or sitting with Thomas, discussing her new managerial role at Hayes Enterprises. For Elijah, these gatherings were a reminder of how far he had come and how many people believed in him. Watching Owen grow, toddling around the living room and calling out Uncle Elijah, filled his heart with pride. It reminded him of the pivotal moment that had brought these two families together. Milestones brought the Carters and Hayes families even closer. The first big celebration came when Elijah graduated from college. The ceremony was held on a bright, breezy spring afternoon. Elijah stood among his classmates in his cap and gown, the gold tassel swaying with every gust of wind. He scanned the crowd, his eyes landing on his family. Camille and Liam waved enthusiastically, while Thomas and Leona sat beside them, beaming with pride. When Elijah's name was called, Camille leapt to her feet, clapping so loudly that even Elijah couldn't help but laugh. "That's my boy," she shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. After the ceremony, the two families gathered on the campus lawn, snapping photos and sharing stories. Thomas clapped Elijah on the back, his tone filled with admiration. "You've done it, Elijah. This is just the beginning." "Thank you," Elijah said, his voice steady but emotional. "I wouldn't be here without all of you." Leona pulled him into a hug. "You earned this, Elijah. Never forget that." Later that evening, back at the Hayes home, a dinner celebration awaited. The house was alive with laughter as both families toasted to Elijah's achievement. "To Elijah," Liam said, raising his glass, "the first doctor in the Carter family." Elijah grinned, his chest swelling with pride. "And to Liam, the future lawyer who's going to make us all look bad." The room erupted in laughter, the bond between the families growing even stronger with each shared moment. The next milestone came with Liam's acceptance into law school. The news arrived on a crisp autumn morning, the envelope bearing the seal of Eastbrook University. Liam hesitated before opening it, his hands trembling slightly. "Come on, Liam," Elijah teased. "Rip it open already." With a deep breath, Liam tore into the envelope and scanned the letter. His eyes widened as he read the words, "Congratulations. You have been admitted to Eastbrook Law with a full scholarship." "Ma." "Elijah, I got in," he shouted, waving the letter in the air. Camille rushed to him, wrapping him in a tight hug. "Oh, Liam," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so proud of you." Elijah clapped his brother on the back, grinning. "I knew you could do it, little bro." The Hayes family joined in the celebration that evening, hosting a barbecue in their backyard. Thomas raised a toast to Liam, his voice filled with encouragement. "To Liam," he said, lifting his glass, "a young man with the drive and determination to change the world. Here's to your bright future." Liam, usually reserved in large groups, couldn't hide his grin. "Thanks, Mr. Hayes. And thanks to all of you for believing in me." As the years passed, the bond between the Carters and Hayes families became a source of strength and inspiration. They shared holidays, celebrated birthdays, and supported one another through challenges. One memorable Thanksgiving was hosted at the Carter home, which had undergone several improvements thanks to Camille's promotion and steady income. The dining table was adorned with a homemade centerpiece crafted by Leona and Camille, and the air was filled with the scent of roasted turkey and fresh-baked pie. Thomas carved the turkey while Liam regaled everyone with stories from his first semester of law school. "I had no idea how much reading there'd be," he joked. "I think I've spent more time in the library than in my own room." Elijah laughed. "Get used to it. Med school's the same way, just more anatomy charts." Owen, now old enough to understand some of the conversation, piped up, "Uncle Liam, are you going to be a superhero lawyer?" The table erupted in laughter, and Liam grinned. "Something like that, Owen." Camille sat back, taking it all in. Seeing her sons thrive and surrounded by the Hayes family filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. The connection between the families wasn't just about shared moments. It was about the lessons they learned from each other. The Carters taught the Hayes family about resilience and the power of perseverance, while the Hayes showed the Carters the impact of generosity and faith in others. For Elijah, the bond with the Hayes family was a constant reminder of how one small act of kindness could ripple outward, changing lives in ways he could never have predicted. As he sat with Thomas one evening, watching Owen play in the yard, Elijah turned to him. "You know, I never expected any of this when I stopped that day. I just wanted to help." Thomas smiled, his gaze thoughtful. "And look where that choice led. Kindness has a way of coming full circle, Elijah. You've given us just as much as we've given you." Elijah nodded, his heart full. Their connection wasn't just a partnership, it was family. And it was a bond that would last for generations. Elijah Carter stood in the exam room of a small community health clinic, adjusting his stethoscope as he prepared to meet his next patient. The clinic was tucked into the heart of a neighborhood often overlooked by larger medical institutions, a place where access to healthcare was scarce and hope was even scarcer. After years of relentless study, grueling rotations, and sleepless nights in medical school, Elijah had finally earned the title of Dr. Carter. But for him, this wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning. He had always known that his path would lead him back to communities like the one he grew up in, places where kindness and care could make all the difference. That afternoon, Elijah met Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly woman struggling to manage her diabetes. She spoke little English and had avoided seeking medical help for fear of the costs. Elijah greeted her warmly, using the Spanish he'd learned during his medical training to explain her condition and how to manage it. "Gracias, doctor," she said, gripping his hand tightly, her eyes filling with tears. "No one has ever taken the time to explain this to me." Elijah smiled. "You're not alone in this, Mrs. Alvarez. We'll figure it out together." Moments like these reminded Elijah why he had worked so hard to become a doctor. It wasn't just about treating illness. It was about empowering people, giving them the tools and support they needed to live healthier lives. While Elijah was building his career in medicine, his younger brother, Liam, was blazing his own trail in the legal world. Fresh out of law school, Liam joined a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal aid to underserved families. His first case was for a single mother fighting to keep custody of her children after losing her home in a fire. The system had failed her, and without legal representation, she had little hope of reuniting with her family. Liam spent weeks preparing for the case, poring over documents and building a compelling argument. On the day of the hearing, he stood before the judge with a steady voice and an unwavering determination. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is not just about laws and regulations. It's about a mother who has done everything in her power to provide for her children despite circumstances beyond her control. She deserves the chance to rebuild her life with them." By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in favor of Liam's client, and the family was reunited. As the mother hugged her children in the courtroom, tears streaming down her face, she turned to Liam and said, "You've given us hope again. Thank you." Liam walked out of the courthouse that day with a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges were immense, but so were the rewards. One evening, the Carter brothers sat on the back porch of their childhood home, catching up over glasses of iced tea. Camille had insisted they take a break from their busy schedules to visit, and the familiar creak of the porch swing and the hum of cicadas brought back memories of simpler times. "You ever think about how far we've come?" Elijah asked, staring out at the yard where they used to play as kids. "All the time," Liam replied, leaning back in his chair. "Especially when I think about how different it could have been if you hadn't stopped to help that day." Elijah chuckled. "I wasn't thinking about the future then. I just knew I couldn't leave Leona on the side of the road." "That one decision changed everything," Liam said, his voice thoughtful. "Not just for you, but for all of us. It's like a ripple effect." Elijah nodded. "And now it's our turn to keep it going." The brothers talked late into the night, sharing stories from their respective careers. They both carried the same mission in their hearts, to use their positions to make life better for others. "For me," Elijah said, "it's about making healthcare accessible to people who can't afford it. Too many families suffer because they don't have basic medical care." And for me, Liam added, it's about fighting for families who don't have the resources to fight for themselves. The system isn't fair, but I'm going to do everything I can to change that. Camille, listening from the kitchen window, smiled quietly to herself. She had always believed in her sons, but hearing them speak with such passion and conviction filled her with a pride that was hard to put into words. Over the next few years, the Carter brothers became known in their respective fields not just for their skills, but for their compassion. Elijah's work at the clinic expanded into mobile health initiatives, bringing care directly to people in need. Liam's reputation as a tireless advocate grew, earning him opportunities to work on cases that shaped local policies for housing, education, and family rights. Their work often overlapped, with Liam referring clients to Elijah's clinic and Elijah advocating for broader healthcare rights in the community. Together, they became a force for change, driven by their shared values and the lessons they had learned from their mother and the Hayes family. At a community event celebrating the clinic's expansion, Elijah and Liam stood side by side, addressing a crowd of supporters and local residents. This clinic isn't just a building, Elijah said, his voice steady. It's a promise to provide care, compassion, and dignity to everyone who walks through these doors. And this community, Liam added, deserves a justice system that works for them, not against them. We're here to make sure that happens. As the crowd erupted in applause, Elijah glanced at Liam and smiled. They were living proof that a single act of kindness could change lives, not just their own, but the lives of countless others. The ripple effect of their choices was far from over, and they were determined to keep paying it forward. The Hayes family home glowed with warmth and light, its wide windows framed by autumn leaves that painted the neighborhood in hues of red and gold. Inside, the air was rich with the aromas of roasted turkey, spiced pumpkin pie, and freshly baked bread. Laughter and the clinking of glasses echoed through the halls as both the Hayes and Carter families gathered around the long dining table, now a cherished tradition. This Thanksgiving was particularly special. It marked not only years of friendship and shared milestones, but also the flourishing of dreams once thought unattainable. Malik Carter, now Dr. Elijah Carter, sat beside his wife, Olivia, and their two children, Ethan and Maya. Across the table, his younger brother Liam chatted animatedly with his fiancée, Clara, a fellow advocate he'd met while working on a housing reform case. Their mother, Camille, watched them with quiet pride, her hands resting on the linen napkin in her lap. Leona Hayes bustled between the dining room and kitchen, making sure every dish was perfect, while her husband, Thomas, stood at the head of the table, a glass of wine in hand, waiting to begin his Thanksgiving toast. Before we dig in, Thomas began, his voice steady and filled with warmth. I want to take a moment to reflect on what we're truly grateful for this year. He paused, looking around the table, his gaze lingering on Malik. Years ago, a young man stopped to help a stranger stranded on the side of the road. That act of kindness set in motion a series of events that none of us could have predicted. It brought our families together, not just as friends, but as family. Malik shifted in his chair, feeling a wave of emotion rise in his chest. Malik, Thomas continued, raising his glass slightly, you didn't just change my wife's life that day, you changed all of ours. Your compassion, your determination, and your refusal to give up on what's right have inspired us in ways I can't fully express. Today, we celebrate not just Thanksgiving, but the journey we've shared and the future we continue to build together. The room erupted in applause, the clinking of glasses mingling with murmured words of agreement. Malik, visibly moved, stood to respond. Thank you, Thomas, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But I think it's fair to say that kindness goes both ways. I never imagined that stopping to help Leona that day would lead to this, a bond between our families that's changed all of our lives. He glanced at his mother, Camille, who smiled and nodded. My family is here today, thriving, because of the faith and generosity you all showed us. That's something I'll never forget. As dinner was served, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, filled with stories and laughter. Ethan and Maya played with Owen Hayes, now a teenager, who regaled them with tales of his first soccer tournament win. Camille shared how her promotion to Director of Operations at Hayes Enterprises had not only stabilized her family's finances, but also allowed her to mentor younger employees. But amid the joy, Malik couldn't help but reflect deeply on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the self-doubt he had carried for so long, the fear of failure that had haunted him in medical school, and the weight of responsibility he had felt as the eldest son. The fact that he was now a doctor, helping families in underserved communities, sometimes felt surreal. Lost in thought? Olivia's voice pulled him back to the present. He smiled at his wife. Just thinking about how far we've come, and how much farther we still have to go. Olivia nodded, her eyes softening. You've already done so much, Malik. But I know you. You'll never stop trying to do more. Across the table, Liam was having a similar moment of introspection. His work as a legal advocate had shown him the harsh realities many families faced, realities that reminded him of their own struggles years ago. He had won important cases, but the systemic challenges still weighed heavily on him. Clara noticed his furrowed brow and leaned closer. Thinking about work? Always, Liam admitted with a chuckle. It's hard not to. There's so much that still needs to change. You'll get there, she said firmly. One case at a time. Liam nodded, her words resonating deeply. We will. Together. As the evening wound down, the families moved into the living room for coffee and dessert. Owen played the piano, filling the house with soft, familiar melodies. Malik sat beside Thomas, their conversation turning to the future. You've done incredible work in the community, Malik, Thomas said. But I wonder, what's next for you? Malik hesitated, then smiled. I've been thinking about that. I want to expand the mobile clinic program, maybe even start a network of clinics across the state. There's so much unmet need, and I know we can do more. Thomas nodded, his admiration evident. That's ambitious, but if anyone can do it, it's you. Malik leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. It's not just about medicine, though. I've been talking with Liam about combining our efforts, addressing healthcare and legal advocacy together. Imagine what we could accomplish if we tackled the root causes of inequality from multiple angles. Thomas raised his glass. To new beginnings, then. As the night came to a close, the families gathered for a group photo in front of the fireplace. The warmth of their bond was captured in every smile, every shared glance. Later, as Malik and Olivia drove home, Ethan and Maya dozing in the back seat, Malik's mind raced with possibilities. He felt the weight of responsibility, not as a burden, but as a privilege. Do you think we'll ever see a world where everyone gets the help they need? He asked Olivia, his voice quiet. She reached over, taking his hand. Maybe not in our lifetime, but we can make sure we leave the world better than we found it. Malik nodded, a sense of purpose settling over him. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness was far from over. And now, it was his turn to create ripples of his own, ensuring that the bond between the Carters and Hayes families continued to inspire and transform lives for generations to come.